For 3 hours, Johnny Carson, 200 audience members, and millions of viewers waited. When the actor finally arrived, Johnny said 3 words that ended his career right there on stage. It was October 7, 1983 at NBC Studios in Burbank. The Tonight Show was scheduled to tape at 5:30 p.m. as it always did. The scheduled guest lineup included comedian Joan Rivers, musician Lionel Richie, and the night's most anticipated guest, Michael Bradford, a rising movie star whose new action film had just opened to massive box office numbers. Michael Bradford was 28 years old and on top of the world. His first major film had made him an overnight sensation. Magazine covers, talk show invitations, million-dollar contracts. Everything a young actor could dream of had fallen into his lap in less than 6 months. But success had done something to Michael Bradford that it does to many people who get famous too fast. It convinced him he was more important than everyone else. By 5:00 p.m., the Tonight Show audience had been seated. 200 people who'd waited months for tickets, who'd driven from all over California, who'd arranged their schedules around this taping. The show's opening was set for 5:30 sharp. Johnny Carson was in his dressing room reviewing his notes, preparing his monologue. Everything was ready, except Michael Bradford hadn't arrived. At 5:15 p.m., Bradford's publicist called. The actor was running late. Traffic, he'd be there soon. The show's producers told Johnny, who nodded and waited. Delays happened. They'd adjust. At 5:45 p.m., 15 minutes after the scheduled start, there was no Bradford and no update. The audience was getting restless. Johnny's stage manager suggested they start without him, rearranged the guest order. Johnny shook his head. We'll wait. He's the draw tonight. At 6 p.m., the publicist called again. Bradford was 20 minutes away, maybe 30. Traffic was bad. Johnny looked at his producer. Tell the audience we're experiencing a delay. Offer them refreshments. The audience stayed. They'd come to see Johnny Carson and a movie star. They'd wait. At 6:30 p.m., 1 hour after the scheduled start, Michael Bradford still hadn't arrived. The audience was getting frustrated. Some people had babysitters waiting. Some had long drives home. The crew was standing around wasting time running up overtime costs. Johnny sat in his dressing room, his jaw getting tighter with each passing minute. Ed McMahon came to check on him. Johnny, we could start, do the monologue, bring out Joan, and slot Bradford in whenever he shows up. Johnny shook his head. We wait. I want everyone to see exactly how long we waited. At 7:00 p.m., the stage manager announced to the audience that Mr. Bradford was still en route and thanked them for their patience. Some audience members started to leave. They had plans. They had responsibilities, but most stayed, curious now about what would happen when this actor finally showed up. At 7:30 p.m., Doc Severson and the band started playing music to keep the audience entertained. Johnny came out on stage, not in his suit, but in casual clothes, and did an impromptu question-and-answer session with the audience. He was charming, funny, gracious. He never complained. He never blamed Bradford, but everyone could sense the tension beneath his professional demeanor. At 8 p.m., the audience had been sitting there for 3 hours. 3 hours of waiting for a show that should have started at 5:30. Johnny was back in his dressing room when the call finally came. Michael Bradford had arrived at the NBC lot. Johnny stood up, straightened his tie, and walked toward the stage. His producer caught up with him. Johnny, do you want to talk to him first? Maybe in private. Johnny kept walking. No, he made 200 people and millions of viewers wait for 3 hours. They deserve to see what happens next. Michael Bradford walked onto the studio lot like he owned the place. He was wearing sunglasses even though it was evening. His hair was perfectly styled. He was laughing with his publicist about something. There was no urgency in his step. No apology in his demeanor. He strolled through the backstage area, past crew members who'd been waiting for hours, and headed toward the stage. Johnny's stage manager intercepted him. Mr. Bradford, you're 3 hours late. The audience has been Traffic was insane, Bradford said dismissively. not even looking at the stage manager. Is makeup ready? I need to look good for the cameras. The stage manager stared at him in disbelief. Mr. Bradford, I don't think you understand. You've kept everyone waiting for 3 hours. Mr. Carson look, man. I'm here now, okay? Let's just get this done. I've got dinner reservations at 9 o'clock. Bradford brushed past the stage manager and walked toward the stage entrance. On stage, Johnny was standing behind the curtain with Ed McMahon. They could hear Bradford approaching, could hear him still talking casually with his publicist. No stress in his voice, no awareness of what he'd done. Ed whispered to Johnny, "You okay?" Johnny's face was completely calm, but his eyes were ice cold. The stage manager approached Johnny. "He's here." He doesn't seem to understand the situation. Johnny nodded. "Send him out now." "Don't you want to send him out?" The stage manager announced to the audience. "Ladies and gentlemen, our guest for the evening, Michael Bradford." The audience applauded, but it was polite applause, restrained applause. They'd been waiting 3 hours. They weren't in a welcoming mood. Michael Bradford walked out on stage with a big Hollywood smile, waving to the audience like he was arriving exactly on time. He was completely oblivious to the room's temperature. He walked over to Johnny's desk where Johnny stood waiting, hand extended for a handshake. Bradford grabbed Johnny's hand, pumping it enthusiastically. "Johnny, great to be here, man. Thanks for having me." Johnny didn't smile. He didn't return the enthusiasm. He looked at Bradford for a long moment, then looked at the 200 people in the audience who'd been sitting there since 5 p.m. Then he looked back at Bradford. "What time did we schedule you for?" Johnny asked, his voice quiet but clear. Bradford's smile faltered slightly. What time was your call time?" Bradford glanced at his publicist in the wings, confused. "I don't know, man. Like 5:30 or something." Johnny looked at his watch. "It's 8:15. You're 2 hours and 45 minutes late. These people have been sitting here waiting for you since 5 o'clock. The audience started to murmur. Some people began to applaud. Not for Bradford, but for Johnny calling him out. Bradford's smile disappeared. "Hey, look. There was traffic. Los Angeles traffic. You know how it is." "Did you call?" Johnny asked. "My publicist called." "Did you call?" Bradford shifted uncomfortably. The swagger was starting to crack. "Well, no, but my people." "Did you apologize to anyone?" "To the audience, to my crew, to me." Bradford laughed nervously. "Come on, Johnny. It's not that big a deal. I'm here now. Let's just do the interview." Johnny looked at him for a long moment. The studio was completely silent. 200 people and millions watching at home were witnessing something unprecedented. Johnny Carson, who was always gracious, always professional, was about to do something he'd never done before. "You're done here," Johnny said. 3 words. Quiet. Final. Bradford blinked. "What?" "You're done here. Leave." Bradford's face went from confused to angry. "Are you serious? I'm your biggest guest tonight. My movie is #1 at the box office. You need me more than I need you." That was his mistake. Those words, that attitude. Johnny's expression didn't change. "Security, please escort Mr. Bradford out of the building." The audience erupted. Some people cheered. Some people applauded. Bradford stood there stunned, unable to process what was happening. "You can't do this," Bradford shouted. "Do you know who I am?" Johnny looked at him calmly. "I know exactly who you are. You're someone who thinks his time is more valuable than 200 other people's time. You're someone who shows up 3 hours late with no apology. You're someone who just told me I need him." Johnny paused. "I don't need anyone. The show will be here tomorrow. Will you?" 2 security guards approached Bradford. For a moment, it looked like Bradford might resist, might make a scene, but then he saw Johnny's face, saw the audience's faces, and realized he'd lost badly. Bradford walked off the stage in humiliation. As he exited, the audience gave Johnny a standing ovation. Johnny stood there for a moment, then addressed the audience. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize that you waited 3 hours for nothing, but I will not allow anyone to disrespect you like that. You are why we're here. Not the guests, not the celebrities, you. The applause grew louder. We're going to do a show now, Johnny continued. It's going to be a great show and it's going to be worth your wait. And it was. Johnny did his monologue. Joan Rivers came out and killed. Lionel Richie performed beautifully. The show ran long but nobody left. They'd witnessed something rare and precious. Johnny Carson drawing a line and defending his audience's dignity. What happened to Michael Bradford after that night became Hollywood legend. The story spread instantly. By the next morning, every newspaper and entertainment show in America was reporting it. Johnny Carson kicks actor off tonight show the headline everywhere. But the story wasn't about Johnny being mean or difficult. The story was about an arrogant young actor who disrespected everyone and faced consequences. Within a week, Michael Bradford's second film offer was quietly withdrawn. The studio said they were going in a different direction. Within a month, his agent dropped him. Creative differences. Within 6 months, Bradford couldn't get a meeting anywhere in Hollywood. The Tonight Show in 1983 was the most powerful platform in entertainment. Being rejected by Johnny Carson publicly on stage in front of millions was a career death sentence. Not because Johnny had some official blacklist, but because everyone in Hollywood saw what had happened and drew their own conclusions. If you couldn't show up on time for Johnny Carson, if you couldn't be professional for the biggest interview of your career, if you thought you were bigger than The Tonight Show, nobody wanted to work with you. Bradford tried to salvage his career. He gave interviews claiming he'd been treated unfairly, that Johnny had overreacted. But the more he talked, the worse it got. People who'd been at the taping spoke out, confirming that Bradford had been 3 hours late and shown zero remorse. His publicist quit. His few remaining defenders went silent. By 1985, Michael Bradford was doing direct-to-video movies. By 1987, he'd left acting entirely. The last anyone heard, he was working in real estate in Arizona. A one-hit wonder who destroyed his own career in 3 hours. Johnny Carson never spoke about the incident again. He didn't need to. He'd made his point, and everyone had gotten the message. Talent without professionalism is worthless. Fame without respect is fragile. And nobody is bigger than basic human decency. The incident became a teaching moment in Hollywood. 4 decades afterward, young actors were told the story of Michael Bradford, the guy who kept Johnny Carson waiting and paid for it with his career. It became a cautionary tale about hubris, about respecting the people who give you opportunities, about understanding that success can disappear as quickly as it arrives. Years later, a young comedian asked Johnny why he'd been so harsh with Bradford. Johnny's answer was simple. I wasn't harsh. I was fair. He made 200 people waste 3 hours of their lives and he didn't care. I simply showed him there are consequences. In Hollywood, everyone wants to be a star, but stars don't show up 3 hours late. Professionals do their job. He wasn't a professional, so he's not a star anymore. The 3 words Johnny Carson said that night, "You're done here," didn't just end an interview, they ended a career. But they also sent a message that echoed through Hollywood for years. Respect the process, respect the people, respect the opportunity. Because if you don't, there's always someone else who will. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe and hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs a reminder that success requires more than talent. It requires professionalism and respect. Have you ever witnessed someone destroy their own opportunity through arrogance? Tell us your story in the comments, and don't forget to ring that notification bell for more true stories about the moments when karma comes instantly and justice is served.